Hello, this is Anna from Madame Sew. Today I'm going to show you how to make a quick gift that you can pull off in about an hour or even less. You only need a few scraps of fabric, pretty small scraps. And since you can piece them together, they can be really small. Like one of the ones I'm using is this tiny little piece. If you have Madame Sew's 32 presser foot set, you're going to need a few of the feet. The zigzag foot, quilting foot. You may need your little stitch in the ditch foot, depending on how you want to put it together, and your binding foot, which is, not essential. You can always bind with a different technique, but this makes it so much faster and so much easier. So I highly recommend it if you have it. You're also going to need your rotary cutter, ruler, and mat for piecing. So let's get started. All right, here we are. So I have my fabrics, my pattern. Here's the little piece of batting. I cut some bias tape out of the same main fabric and some thread. I decided on some pink for my quilting. It's going to read white and probably be very subtle, but I think these colors are pretty subtle. So as you can see, they're pretty small scraps. This was an old shirt. This came tying up a bundle of fat quarters, so it's all really tiny. And if you know me, okay, so I'm going to put this aside because I'm not going to use it right now. Lining 2. Okay, so let's decide on the design. I only have a strip of this, so I could do, in fact, I think I like that idea. Just a couple of stripes like that. Pretty simple, and just let's measure and make sure that, they're not going to be too big or too small. I like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my ruler. And of course, my strips are going to be narrower than this because we need to take a whole ½ inch off in seam allowance. So I'm going to make a cut. Oops. You do have to take out the safety. There we go. Now it will work. Okay, so do not put your finger on the fabric. Put them well into the ruler. Lay it next to it before the fabric starts, and just, isn't that nice? So that's going to be one. And let me just see roughly where I want the second one. And I think, okay. All right, so I'm gonna just make, and as you can see, I'm not squaring anything off. I don't care. If they're crooked, they're crooked. I kind of like that. This is about having fun. I have enough things that I have to be very exact about in my life. Quilting is for fun, working. Let's go over to the machine. So as you can see, I'm using my nice 1/4 inch foot. I'm aligning. It's a very short seam, so I'm not bothering with pins. And there we go. Just keep it nicely aligned with the edge of the lip there. And look at your nice 1/4 inch seam. I love this foot. And once we finish this seam, we'll add the top and bottom blue pieces, and I'll see you at the ironing table. Let's iron the seams towards the blue piece, towards the main piece. Just give it a good quick press, and let's see how it looks. Really nice. Look at that. Very nice. All right. So let's make our quilt sandwich. Let's put the lining wrong side up. I mean, in this case, it doesn't have a wrong side, but if you do, make sure it's wrong side up. Now the batting goes on top. Smooth it all out. And let's do the quilt top. Let's try to center it. Now let's use our curved pins to pin the 3 layers together, and you only need 3 for something this small, so you'll be done pretty quickly. Alright, now let's make a plan of how to quilt this. I could do some horizontal lines here, or maybe I could follow the diagonal, maybe even go the other way and make some diamonds. How about maybe a rectangle there and at the bottom? Yeah, I like that. But then I have to take into account the edging, and then I'll have to calculate. Nope, I'm not going to do that. Maybe, yeah, I like the horizontal lines, but let me, for sure I want to edge stitch that, just right along those edges there. So you know what? Let me start with that. Alright, now I have my stitching the ditch foot ready. I'm aligning the edge of the fabric against the blade right here. And I'm also making sure that my needle is in the right position, right where I want it. So let me lift it. See, it's hitting right there, pretty close to the edge. And now you're just gonna start sewing, not too fast. And leaning gently against that blade to make sure that the stitch is even. And there we are. Let's see how it looks. All right, very nice. Look at that. All right, so now we're going to do all the other 3. Let's go do that. All right, looks very, very nice. I like it. Let's cut our pattern now. Just lay it, center it, and you should have enough room to move it up or down a little bit, depending on where you want your lines or whatever design you settled on. And the easiest way to do this is just start on one side, align your ruler there, and cut that first side off. There you go. And now we're just going to turn it. And my ruler is really wide. If you have a narrower ruler, it might be easier, because then you could actually pin the pattern to the fabric, so you don't have to readjust it. But it's so small that it really isn't a big deal. Now we're going to cut this side. And we'll keep going around, and then finally cut the angled edge. Now we need to actually cut the curves here. And since they're so tiny, I'm going to secure my pattern with some pins. And if you have a small rotary cutter, a small diameter rotary cutter, it's ideal for these tiny little curves, but I've misplaced mine, so I'm going to use my scissors. And I'm simply, just going to hold it and make sure that everything is pinned through, and just cut around it. And, the edge is going to be bound, so even if there are like little, corners sticking out, little angles, it's really not a big deal. So go ahead and cut all the other corners. All right, here it is. Let's see how it's going to look when it's folded. Oh, some threads in there. Let's get them out now before we finish it off. And now I'm just going to pin this loose end. Since I didn't do a lot of quilting, I want to make sure that these edges are secure. And in fact, I think I'm actually going to zigzag around the whole thing. If I had done some dense quilting, it would be unnecessary, but it's going to make my binding a lot easier if all these edges are properly secured. So let's go do that quickly. I've switched to my zigzag foot here, and it's set to a pretty narrow stitch, and it's a very simple step. In fact, it is so simple, I think I can go a little faster than this. Let me change my speed. And just make sure that you go gently around the curves. You want to make sure that those are, well bound. All right, so just go all the way around. Here it is, as you can see, just very simple, narrow, and it will be hidden by the binding. All right, we're going to start the binding. So it's important to know, let me just bring it out, that you're going to start from the wrong side. We're going to bind this part around the curve, just the top of the curve, and then we're going to fold it just like this, and we're going to continue both binding and joining at the same time. Okay, so it's going to look weird, but it works out. All right, so install your bias foot. Open it up, make it a little wider than you need, just to make it easier to slide your tape in. As always, make sure that it goes in the right grooves. You need to have it open in the middle, and use a pin on an owl or maybe some tiny scissors just to push it through. And if it's easier, you can also do this without installing the foot and then just clip it onto the machine, onto the bar. All right, now we're going to just slide the case in there, and as you can see, we're starting on the wrong edge, as I said. Just putting it in, put it down. You may want to lengthen your stitch length because you're going through a few layers, especially once you fold the case. That's going to be pretty thick. And now we're going slowly. Just move really slow as you need. I like to crawl, as you can see. And as you approach the corner, just remember, and this is the same for the curves, that the foot is taking care of the tape. I am a little anal. You'll see how I fiddle with it. But basically, you need to just stop and readjust and think about the fabric, about the quilted case. That's what you're moving around. The tape really pretty much takes care of itself. You don't want to push it too hard because then you'll be moving it out of the way. So just readjust however often you need. Check on the other side. Make sure your stitches are catching the tape on the other side, and just continue slowly. And as you can see, just readjust, just move things around as much as you really need, as much as, whatever makes you feel comfortable. I like to fiddle with the width. Now just make sure you're not tightening it too much. Okay, here we are at the curve. And see, I'm stopping. I'm going to stop right here. And just move it a little, readjust. Just as when you're like doing any curve. A few stitches, stop, readjust. Just make sure that it's in the tape. It's basically all you need to worry about. And the tape, as you can see, moves on its own. All right, let me just put it in, and we're pretty much, pretty much done with that. Just keep going slowly all the way around, and I'll see you at the end. All right, here we are at the end. We're going to cut the excess tape before we finish it. And, give yourself an inch. You only really need a ½ inch, but to be on the safe side, give yourself a full inch. All right, let's put a couple of pins here before we continue. Because now that we're going to be sewing all, both layers together, we want, especially that curve, we want it to be secure. We don't want to be worrying about that when we're trying to, run it through the tape. And before I put that pin, let me just slide this in so it is aligned where it should be. Okay, that looks good. Let's pin it. Now let's pay attention up here to this edge right there. When this edge that's coming in here reaches the foot, okay, you're going to make sure that it goes under. Otherwise, it's going to stop and it's going to jam your stitches. Okay, so make sure that it's all the way in. Everything is aligned. All right, and let's just start moving slowly. And I am actually going to keep my scissors here, keeping things under and in. This really helps just for the beginning. All right. That went smoothly. And now that it's out of the way, just keep going slowly all the way around, and I'll see you at the end. I'll show you where to cut the tape. All right, here we are at the end. We're going to cut the excess tape before we finish it. And, give yourself an inch. You only really need a ½ inch, but to be on the safe side, give yourself a full inch. And now just continue sewing all the way to the end of the tape. And look at it, looks pretty good. All that's left to do is hand sew that little end of the tape to the back, and you'll be all done. Look at how good it looks on both sides. Well, that was a fun, quick little project, wasn't it? As always, if you have any questions, comments, just let us know and we'll be happy to answer them. Make sure you subscribe to Madame Sauce channel, and we'll see you in the next one.